Okay, let's see how this goes. So, I apologize if the audio is messed up on this. I had pretty much no time. I actually got home a few hours ago, and there was a lot of requests for this. So, I wanted to do an example budget and kind of explain the concept of it. There's a lot of things to go over in the first video. I'm thinking later I'll do more directed videos, take questions, answer questions, and hopefully figure out a better long term situation for my setup and the quality of the videos. So for now, we're going to settle with Notepad, a free recording software, and this free app that's a calculator. So um, there's a few concepts to explain first and foremost. Um, Basically, you need to divide your bank account into separate accounts. So I'm hoping by the time you see this, you already have some money uh, stowed away somewhere or buried in a backyard. Um, Hopefully, there's something that you have. Also, hopefully, you have some kind of income. But basically, the first step is splitting up every one of your expenses and the amount that is required. Some of these are up to you. And trust me, you're going to be wrong when you first estimate whatever you spend. You're not going to get it right. I think it took me a year and a half before I started actually understanding what I spent. And when you first start, you'll probably think, oh, well, I spend most of my money, like I thought, I spent most of my money on allowance, like video games and things like that. But in actuality, most of my spending was in food. I thought $8 here or there at Taco Bell wasn't going to stack up, and it did. So you might not know what your problem area is, but you'll figure that, and I'll go over kind of how to adjust it. But the first thing you need to do is put down what do you think you spend on each thing. If you don't want to guess and you don't want to learn the hard way, you could go back like a month in your bank account and try to like divvy up. Okay, this was food, this was something else. But I'm telling you, when you go back a month in your bank account, it starts looking like crazy. Oh, Flux is kicking on. Let's turn that off. You can tell this is really professionally done. Okay. Let's also close this. So, um, yeah, you're basically going to not know, and that's okay that you don't know what you spend. These are estimates. Some of them are a lot easier. So, like, I hope you know how much your car costs each month. I hope you know what your car insurance costs each month. And then some of them are up to interpretation, and you're gonna have to learn the hard way, and just know that's okay. But this first step is just getting those expenses. So for me, what I did here was, and I kind of do this in my own budget, I use an app called And Money. So it looks like And Money, like that. Not friendly to saying, but basically it's a way of doing the envelope system, if you're familiar with that, of doing a budget, um, but it's digital. So essentially, what you're doing is you're taking your full bank account number and you're splitting it into subcategories. And what this does is it helps you know, okay, what can I touch and what can't I? If you're used to looking at your bank account and then sometimes it looks really nice and you're like, wow, I have, and I'm going to throw out just random examples, but like I have $3,000 in my bank account. That's great. It's usually hovers around like 1,800 or whenever I look at it. That's not healthy because you don't know how much you have for the bills. You might kind of know, okay, most of my bills come out mid month or end of month. But that uncertainty, that's what we're trying to tame. That's what we're trying to learn to get out of the habit of. So, what I have is asterisks, what you see here, they are non negotiables. These are things that you absolutely have to pay. So, if I have to drive to my job, I gotta have a car, I gotta have car insurance. And for me, I also put an asterisk on car maintenance because car maintenance is something that if you neglect it, guess what? You're gonna have to start worrying about this car payment. You're gonna have to look for another car. You have to be able to maintain it when something comes up. So for me, I put an asterisk on that. It's a non-negotiable. I cannot skip that when I get paid. So that's what basically you'll do is you'll split your bank account into this. If you have nothing, if you have $0 when you watch this, Guess what? This determines how your next paycheck is being divided. So for me, what I do is I now know, me personally, most of my big bills like mortgage and cars, but I just paid it off last few months. Thank you very much. Um, were all came out the end of the month. So for me, I knew it. As long as it was the beginning of the month and I had a paycheck coming in, I still had another paycheck before I really absolutely had to put money into car or mortgage. That rhythm, you're not going to know. Just try to get in that rhythm, figure out when things are. Sometimes you can change when certain things are due. So if you can do that, or if people ask you, hey, when do you want this bill to come, instead of just saying, I don't care, first of the month, whatever, try to time it up with other stuff, and it will help you get in a rhythm of your finances. So, um, yeah, so basically, let's say I got paid. I'm going to put $20 in allowance, and then I'm going to put $200 in car. I'm going to put, 120 in car insurance. And I'm telling you, not all of these are going to be paid when you do it. So when you get your paycheck, it's very rare, and maybe you're doing really well, but it's really rare for your paycheck to be able to cover your entire budget. You're going to have some of these that don't get covered, and that's okay, because some of these you put in monthly, like bills, for instance, cars. You don't pay cars by like every 2 weeks. You get paid usually in America every 2 weeks, um, but the car payment itself comes every month. Where allowance, for instance, is a little different, because what I do for allowance is $20 is assuming that actually my allowance is about $40 a month. In extra months, there's 4 months a year that have three paychecks instead of two, but I don't even consider that when doing these calculations. So this would assume that I get $40 total a month. If you don't like this method, if you want to just change everything to monthly to make it easier, go for it. This is just how I personally do mine. So basically, every paycheck, let's say I got paid $20, goes into allowance. Car 200, car insurance 120, car maintenance 25, clothes 10, and certain accounts are going to grow, like clothes and allowance. They're going to grow. Don't touch them. You only spend them whenever you feel like spending them. If there's a hot new pair of jeggings that you just have to have, you only get those sexy jeggings when you have the money. I couldn't even begin to tell you how much that probably is. Probably too much, in my opinion. But you only spend it when you have it accumulated in clothes, because every paycheck you throw in $10, or every allowance you throw in 20. This is tough, and this is going to take some time to figure out, as far as these accounts, because these are completely up to you. 20 was absolutely my first allowance. Now I'm doing better in my life. I have a better job. Um, Things are looking pretty well because of this budgeting. So now it's up to 50 a paycheck. So I get $100 about a month, which is awesome. But it took a long time of having 15, $20 in allowance every paycheck, and that's tough, especially with Steam games. And actually, Steam is having a sale now at Christmas, so take it easy. But you're going to go through here. Food will most likely be wrong. I'm talking to you bachelors. You think you don't spend a lot on food. You go to Taco Bell more than you'd like to admit. I'm going to guess you probably spend a lot on it. So food's a rough awakening. Fuel I have pretty high. That is my actual fuel, what I spend monthly, but I drive a ton for my job. So my fuel's probably higher than most people. Internet, obviously necessity. You're probably watching this on YouTube. And then you just work your way down. And the goal is to make sure that you that the money is there before the bill is owed, essentially. So you want, some of these are going to swell, like clothes, like I said. Hopefully car maintenance also expands, especially because tires. So you want to make sure car maintenance is pretty easy. For the most of the year, you're just trying to cover oil changes every so often. But when tires come around, it's tough. So you want to put enough in car maintenance. And then you'll start seeing some accounts get bigger. That's the first goal. But I will tell you, starting a budget sucks the most, for sure. Sorry, I'm like super dry mouth. So yeah, starting a budget is the worst because basically you're flexing this muscle of having to learn discipline, having to tell yourself no, and that's why most people hate budgets. That's why I got so much shit from people when I started it, oh, hey, we're at a bar, can you have a shot with us, or is that in your budget? Um, that's what I would always get. And the answer was, yeah, I'm going to pull from allowance. But that first bit of not, the first thought you have is, man, there's all these things I'm going to have to come to terms with. And it's so much easier to not face those things than it is for me to be disciplined and um, just have to you basically think of what you need to give up instead of what you can gain, which is natural. It's the same thing when you do a diet. Someone says they're on a paleo diet, you think, oh no, man, I can't do that because I love carbs too much. I love pasta too much. Um, but the thing is, this is why this part of the budget sucks, and it can take months to get to a point where you start seeing benefits. But you have to push through. The reason is the payoff is absolutely worth it. The payoff is you get to a point where, um, oh, I hit a thing on my tire. My tire hit a nail, and I now have to pay 120 bucks for a car. Well, if your car maintenance budget has been accumulating $25 a paycheck, and now you're at a point where you have 150 bucks in there, no problem. Just get a new tire. And when you do that and you don't wince, that's the payoff. That's what this whole thing is about. But the waiting period, I think I explained it to my brother in the sense of that point when all you can do is just wait on paychecks and you're basically time is now the measurement. It sucks because you can't do anything more unless you want to go out and be very entrepreneurial and wipe people's windshields down on the side of the road and ask for a tip. I don't know. Maybe you can be more industrious than me, but in that meantime, waiting for that paycheck, it sucks. But once that first crisis happens and you're thinking, oh, well, that's what I have an emergency fund for, that's the payoff. So that's kind of the hard part of it. But I guess the whole thing is you can lay all of this out in a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet's infinitely better than Notepad. Like the app and Money I mentioned earlier and other apps, they basically make you make sub accounts and then you can deposit this money in there, and it's basically a calculator app. It's a glorified calculator app where you can put, you can put new transaction, Kmart, I don't know why Kmart, $22, and you put it under the clothes budget. And then basically you now know you spent that money in clothes at that establishment for that amount of money, and it auto subtracts it for you for whatever you had in that account. That's what I say. If you hear me, I think I already did say it, in the red. That's what in the red means. It just means you are negative. Which, when that happens, you need to treat it like debt. You need to pay that off before you can spend it ever again, especially in the red. And that will happen in the beginning as you start learning how to allocate. So here's, like I said, an example budget. I think I'm going to do further videos on how Overflow works. I have an Overflow account, not everyone does. Savings, vacation, stuff like that. And then everything else I'm looking at down here is way more than this video can do. I don't even know what my running time is now, but it's pretty long. That's about 14 minutes. That's not too bad. Let's keep going. Let's trudge forward. Let me take a sip here. Again, I'm sorry at the low quality of this. This is literally my first time doing a video aside from me strumming on a guitar when I was 15. So, realistic goals. That's actually a great note. So realistic goals. I think I mentioned in the thread I eventually talked about this, is that when you're setting this, I'm saying you're learning it, you gotta be realistic to yourself. I have a friend of mine, the guy who showed me how to do budgets. He is a robot. I've actually called him that most of his life. But it's because he is so disciplined. If he can't do something, it doesn't matter. He's not going to do it if he doesn't have the money set aside. That's just how he is. He's a super disciplined guy. Me, absolutely not so much. I'm drinking wine as I'm doing this video. So I'm not super disciplined. But that's important because you need to realize what kind of person you are. And also realize that slack is dangerous. When it comes to budget, the whole reason people get in a problem with budgets is because they give themselves too much slack. A good metaphor I think about this is kind of what kind of person you are. Is let's imagine a scenario where you find a duffel bag full of money and take out the whole, oh, it's traceable, the IRS will find that, you got to clean it, blah blah blah, Ozark stuff. You have some money that you have and it's yours. You can do whatever you want with it, and you keep it in a room in your house, and it's just a bag full of money. Some of us would go, oh great, I have a bag of money. Anytime a bill comes in, I'll figure out how much money I owe him, give him the money. Hey, keep the change. No, don't worry about it. And then anytime I need food, just take a little bit of money, no problem. And then it would eventually go away. I mean, that's how it is. It's not an infinite resource. But some of us would go, okay, how much is in that bag? I've not sat down and actually counted it, and I have no idea how much I'm spending, and I need to figure all of those things out so I know exactly how long I can depend on this bag of money. If you're watching the video, you're probably I probably got some money, it's fine. But that's yours. You need to know how much you're pulling in and how much you're spending. It just makes sense that you're going to do that. That you're going to understand how long you can rely on this thing. And that's what budgets also give. It also gives you an ability to know, what does the future look like? And sometimes that's scary, but it's not as scary as uncertainty. Not knowing at all is way scarier. So much stress I used to have because I just didn't know how long. I thought I was in trouble when I actually wasn't. If you spend $700 or $600 or $400 on tires, depending on your income, that's a lot of money, and that's tough. And you see that bank account dip and you think, oh my God, I can't buy anything. But when you have $60 in allowance still, and you spend $600 on tires that you've been slowly accumulating money in under car maintenance, you start feeling a lot better about things. You start going, oh wow, I still have fun money after buying that tire. You're not just looking at these rough estimates or the bag getting a little smaller or being half empty now. That's the goal, really. But that time in between sucks. So here's the thing too, falling off the wagon I wanted to talk about. When you go in, you're going to fall off the wagon. You're going to be disciplined. You're going to be good for a few weeks. And if you're like me, just how I am with trying to start a workout routine, you're going to, binge. You're going to kind of come off the wagon. You're not going to balance the budget. Because the thing about these budgets, when you do a mandatory system like me, Mint has some kind of way of auto-managing it. I'm not a huge fan because it's too general for me. Like me, I break out tips in mine because I don't, again, an American thing. But if you're in a restaurant, you have to give a tip. Otherwise, you're human garbage. You have to give a tip because they're probably needing a budget as well because they don't make a lot of money. And they depend on those tips. So me, I started finding that because food is my affliction. That's the thing that I really splurge on. It's my reward and my punishment. It's everything. So I would pay people less tips for good service because that's my food money. That's my thing I really lean on. So I made a separate tip thing that I would throw money in like clothes, and it would accumulate. And then when I got a lot of money in tips, I would just start dropping these really big tips on people that had great service. And to me, it was like a charity thing too. So you can have accounts if charity is important to you, or maybe you have to start saying no to your friends more. As maybe they splurge, maybe they go to bars. I hate bars because they're so expensive, and I'm just not that kind of guy anyway. But if you have friends that go to bars all the time, you're going to have to start saying no unless you make your bar budget $150 a month or something, depending on how much they go out. it's going to cause problems for you. You're going to start saying no. Your friends are going to get shitty, maybe. They might be like, oh, man, what the heck? Why are you saying no all the time? So maybe make a friend's budget. Maybe, start putting money away for friends if you have the ability to. And then you can start doing maybe hosting parties. And that friend's budget becomes something that you spend on them. So it's like, hey, I saved this money. So I can do something for you to lighten the shit that I get for not going out with you guys. So all of these things can kind of come into budget, and I don't want to scare you off before it happens. I just want to make sure everyone knows like the realistic issues that can happen with it. Luckily, my friends are fucking awesome. I just have to say no to a lot of games. I don't care how cool Monster Hunter is. I'm not interested in it. But I have friends that just see their glass half full guys, and they just love certain games. And so they always are like, oh, this game's so great, you got to get it. And then I have to do tons of research on it on my own because I'm frugal and I only get so much to spend on games where they, that's their thing they spend money on. So all of these are things to think about before you get in. Just getting ahead of it and just thinking, okay, how can I get ahead of this? And make sure that basically I'm not blindsided anytime someone gets on me for the budget, because people criticizing you for it and you having to say no to something and then pushing enough and then you breaking, that's how you fall off the wagon. That's how you have problems. And then just like I was saying, the worst part about a budget is when you first start. The worst part, it's like jogging. If you went jogging and you were not in shape, it sucks really bad. But if you stopped after 2 weeks of jogging and went back a few weeks later, it's just gonna suck again. But the longer you do it, the more it becomes autopilot. Your body adjusts, and then you get to the point where you actually can enjoy jogging. I've never pushed through that barrier. I can't stand jogging. I'm not a long distance runner. But every time I do it, I have this thing where I'm like, ugh, this is like how it feels when you're starting a budget. You don't see the reward yet, but you just deal with the hard part at the beginning. So push through. So how to adjust it? That's pretty easy. If you start seeing things getting in the red, if you start noticing, oh boy, I really thought I didn't spend that much on food. I think when I first started, I put $80 a month is what I thought I spent on food. Now you can see it's a lot more realistic because I just really did. I thought, oh man, I just get fast food a lot, but it's cheap, right? Well, it's not when it adds up. And that's what that budget helps you do, is face, kind of the reality of how much you're spending. And really, there's lots of things that you can do to save money. Personal maintenance, for one. That's my word for me. I'm anal as hell. So my food, when I'm at the grocery store, I started just saying, that's groceries. But then I bought body wash, deodorant, toothbrushes, toothpaste, whatever other thing you buy, hair product or whatever. And then it adds up and it's taken out of my food. So I made personal maintenance so I knew how much I'm spending on myself, and haircuts. All of that added up. So me personally, I'm a guy. I already have a receding hairline, so I have very few options. I don't have Prince Charming hair like I'm sure most of you have. But I started shaving my own head. So I got clippers that for $20 on Amazon, and that was way more economical than getting my hair cut every few weeks. So certain things will make you kind of rethink how you do it, and you'll think, okay, well, what can I change food-wise? Food is super easy, by the way. Go to Google, and you'll get a billion ads, but go to Google and type in food on a budget, and you'll get a bajillion results. There are lots of Reddit threads, tons of things on the internet for how to do a lot of these things on a budget. You do have options, and you will have to change the way you do some stuff, most likely. Unfortunately, we don't all live in a world where we make tons of money and we're just, where do I store all this money? I have too much of it. It doesn't happen a lot. So you will have to make some sacrifices. Just get to that payout where emergencies happen and it gets better. So maybe this is the best way to do this. Priorities. You guys see my terrible typing. Debt. First things first, you want to prioritize debt. The reason why is because debt is something that usually has interest. So when I start talking about Overflow, because that's essentially that was a bad transition. I didn't really say it when I went into it because this is absolutely completely, if you can't tell, off the cuff. Um, but debt is the first thing because it's negative money that gets bigger. I mean, there's nothing scarier than that. You don't want money that gets bigger, that you owe. So your priority when you get that extra influx of money, first thing, and actually, this is a tough one. Maybe people will disagree with me, but point 0.5, not 1. It's emergency. That's my opinion. I think most people would agree. Emergency, I guess, should be first and not debt. Debt is really scary and you need to focus on debt, maybe to emphasize it. That's why my brain went there. But first is emergency. So this money here, when you first start getting extra money, so let's assume after a few months I'm following this, I've adjusted it, and maybe I was a little optimistic on how much I spent on food or whatever. But let's say you spend this money and you get some extra, it needs to go to emergency first. And what emergency is generally recommended as, from what I can tell, like Dave Ramsey type stuff, is generally 3 months of bills is what you want. You want 3 months of bills to be covered. That way, if you lose your job, worst comes to worst, you have a cushion. Tire or like car stuff. A lot of stuff can go under emergency, and you need to be strict about how you define it. If a new Dark Souls came out, which is one of my favorites, if it came out, it's not an emergency to make sure you have the newest Dark Souls. I wish they'd come out with more. But that's not an emergency. So define it as like you don't have income, your income is stifled, you're hurt, medical bills, something like that constitutes an emergency. But that's the first cushion you need to build. And so if 3 months here, so 3 months, let's see, mandatory. Because I assume for me, if I'm dipping into emergency, I'm not going to put money aside for allowance. I don't have a job. That's me personally. This is how I handle it. But the full expenses for $12.65 would be... That's my expenses. Most of them are monthly. So yeah, it'd be $7.95 if I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel. Oh no, that's not right. $12.65. See, this is why you get an app that has history, so you can see where you messed up. The regular calculator app doesn't do that. Okay, so this would be my emergency right now, bare minimum. Or no, that's full. That's not bad. You should be able to make that if this is your budget. So start putting that away. It'll obviously, depending on your income, because I have no income listed here as an example, this would be what your emergency fund should look like. I would round it off to a nice clean number because I guess I'm OCD. But that would be your emergency, and that would be absolutely untouchable unless you actually hit the few times there's an emergency. And I'm really hoping you guys don't have an emergency. But it happens, and that's what it's there for. It's for, oh shit, this thing just happened. My windshield. That happened to me, actually. I used emergency fund because I was driving and a rock hit my windshield and cracked it. And then the crack started spreading and spreading and spreading. And I had to get a new windshield, and it's not super cheap. So car maintenance was low, so I used some of the emergency money. Then, if you ever use emergency money, guess where all your extra money's going to go? It's going to go to refill emergency. If your expenses go up, you need to reassess your emergency. It's annoying. You don't have to do it 24/7, but I would check it every once in a while. Because, okay, I have a wireless mouse downstairs that I can use on a different TV, and it's moving, which means the cats are rubbing against my mouse downstairs. Okay, so yeah, you gotta reassess emergency every once in a while, and that also kind of brings us to overflow. So what happened to me was I threw a bunch of money in emergency, and then it started to accumulate, and then I got to 3 months. Yay! First milestone, right? Well, then I started getting all this extra money, and I made an account called Overflow, and it just accumulated money. And then I started thinking, oh, wow, I have $1,000 in Overflow all of a sudden. I mean, how much are HTC Vives? Let me Google that really quick. And then you start spending indiscriminately. So you need to have a plan for Overflow before you get to that point. And again, we're assuming that everything's going great. I'm sure I'm going to get questions about what happens if things aren't, and I can try to help from there. But assuming everything's going well, you're going to have money in the overflow. So there's a few ways to deal with this, but the next priority I would do is retirement. So retirement, generally, from what I can tell, is, as a good, decent rule of thumb, is 10 to 15% of your income should be going towards retirement. It's not fun to think about at all. Absolutely not fun. Nobody wants to think about retirement, especially if you're young. But here's the thing. If you're young, you need to be thinking about retirement. Look up retirement savings. Dave Ramsey, he has a video on this where he explains the difference between someone who puts money away when they're really young versus someone who's like 28. It's a huge difference because compound interest is a serious force in nature. You need to get that money in soon because it will gather interest as it goes. Easy ways to do this: if your company offers a 401k, find out, especially if they match money where they will throw like a certain amount of money towards you. That's free money. That's basically them saying, hey, if you use this system, we'll pay for part of it to make sure you use it. Use that money. Do whatever the cap is. If you do that, and let's say you're at like 5%, right? But 10 to 15 is what you really should be doing. You can also open up like a Roth IRA is generally pretty good for people trying to put money away. Again, this is U.S. specific, but basically it's like a system where you can only put in something like a few $1,000s a year. But it's good because basically you can put money in and you pay taxes as you put it in, but you don't pay money on don't pay taxes rather when you pull it out. So if you just put money in as you go, when you pull the money out, again, we're talking to U.S. people, you don't pay any taxes. And obviously if you let it grow with interest, that's pretty beneficial. There might be some kind of equivalent in other countries, but from what I understand, that's a pretty good deal. So making sure that retirement is covered is really helpful. Past that, again, this is assuming things are just going splendid, and you're going to have a lot of tears and sweat when you start your budget. So this is a ways away, so maybe that'll make you relax a little bit. But trust me, it's worth it. Maybe you'll start getting into other things that you can start putting money towards. So savings isn't a bad one. That's basically where you just have money sitting aside. And maybe you have something to save to. Maybe you have a mortgage or a wedding. I just got married, so the wedding budget was really big, and I saw my bank account nearly half when I spent it. But we actually were ahead of budget, so it was good. But when you see your bank account drop that much, your first thought's, but that's what you save for. And then here are some other accounts that I've kind of had laid out here for 30 minutes that you've probably been wondering about. I already kind of talked about TIP, but home improvement is a big one, especially if you own a house. You don't want to get to the point where it degrades and you don't improve on it. So I think this is my actual home improvement budget. Or no, maybe it's 15 now, but it was 10 for a long time. But eventually when, especially because I just got married and your wife wants to repaint the entire downstairs and wants to do something about the carpet, it's a great thing that you've been putting money in home improvement for quite a while, so that you are ready for the inevitable nesting that will happen and has happened to me. And then pets is another one. So pets is kind of tough. Because again, they only get shot so often, especially when you first get them. But again, pet emergencies are absolutely no joke. I so many times when you talk about pets, I hear, I spent X amount of money on that cat or whatever. So making sure your pet's budget is untouched and large is good. And it can pay for toys and food and everything that has to do with pets. Homeowners Association, maybe it's another strictly American thing, but that's another thing that you might have to consider. And for me personally, I put booze in another category. my friend who I may have mentioned in the last video was super strict. He probably has booze as allowance. Maybe I'm not like that. Maybe I'm weaker than him in that sense. But booze is a central part of my existence. Like I said, I'm drinking wine. So if you know booze is happening, put money in there. And especially the reason I like putting things like booze in their own account is because people who can develop unhealthy relationships with substances, such as booze, it's in my family, absolutely. So if you are spending money on something that can grip people like booze, it helps keep you in line when you only have so much money. If you start noticing, man, my booze is in the red by $150, that's a great red flag to say, hey, things aren't going really well for me. What's the reason? Why am I dipping into this thing that I used to only spend 15 a paycheck, and where now I'm spending 30 a paycheck or 40 a paycheck? It's a great red flag to show that maybe you need some help, and maybe you need to reach out to some friends and try to or maybe professional help, or therapy isn't on here, but that would be another great one. If you have a therapy that you go talk to somebody, would be a great expense too, and one that I had for a while. So also, vacations is a popular one. I treat vacations as basically a sub Overflow. So one way to deal with Overflow, because I know I'm all over the place, a system that I started doing was I basically had Overflow ranked, and then I had a sub Overflow. So like Overflow is where my money goes when my emergency's capped out, everything is paid for, I have a little extra money left, I put it in Overflow. And then once Overflow got to $500, I started transferring that $500 to my sub Overflow, which, let's say it's vacation. Let's say we're, next year we're planning on going on vacation. We already have time requested off or whatever. Then that $500 goes into vacation, and now I'm that much closer to having enough money for our vacation. So that's how I handled having that. And obviously that's the goal, right? Of having the budget, is that extra money comes in. When you start the budget, you're thinking, oh dear God, how am I possibly going to stay afloat? And the goal is that you will get to a point where you'll be like, what am I supposed to do with all this money? I get money coming in, and then I gotta, what do I do with it? That's the goal. That's what we want, right? So yeah, helping it growing, investing in retirement. Oh, I already kind of met my requirements. I guess the other thing to talk about would be savings. I guess investing. I don't know a lot about investing. I'm a complete novice. And the thing about investing is, this is where we're getting into people who have more money than they know what to do with. I'm not quite in that category yet. I've done well, but I'm not in the category of investing. So investing can be like stocks. It can be mainly stocks. I'm not going to go into get real estate. I mean, at that point, I'm talking like a real solid trust fund kit. I don't know any of this. Investing can take a lot of forms. Stock market's the most accessible, but the way that my strict budget friend has put it is, do not put any money in the stock market that you're not willing to lose. Treat it like a casino. You don't know if you're going to make that money back. Oh, I know that, for instance, I had a lot of people saying that Canvas, which I think is owned by Snoop Dogg, was a weed company, whether it was recreational or medical or whatever, and it was going to grow huge. And the stocks, by the way, have, I think, grown huge. But someone said, hey, we should throw money at this stock. But I was not at a point where I had lots of money left, and I had a wedding coming up, and I couldn't justify putting the money in there because I didn't want to be that person that's like, oh man, I'm going to put all this money on this blackjack game, because it could be gambling. And it can pay off. Just like a blackjack game or whatever, or craps, it can pay off. But I wasn't ready to do it. And yeah, the stocks have gone up, so I would be making money on that. But that's how you need to treat the stock market, because how many times do you hear about stocks just dropping randomly and people not knowing how to invest, or people thinking they know how to invest and they don't? So, like when I talked about Roth IRAs, there are places that will do it for you. Again, don't listen to me when you start talking about investment. Go look up Dave Ramsey. But I think it's something like when you are younger, you want to invest aggressively, and then at about like late 30s, maybe early 40s, you want to start not making aggressive growth, and you want to start doing more moderate growth. You want to start doing things that are sure bets because you have more money to lose. When you're younger, you can, the risk is worth it because you usually will pay off more. But then when you get older, you want to start, you got to realize, hey, I'm at the poker table. I got a lot more chips than a lot of these guys, and I got to start like pulling it back and not playing so aggressive and bluffing because it's not worth it. I guess is maybe a okay way of putting it. What else can I go over? I'm sorry, I'm doing all these in like the span of an hour. I want to make sure I address everything. I don't know, guys. I think that's about all I have. I think the thing that I skipped over most in all of this was apps. Again, there are lots of apps that do this, but I use a manual method. So And Money is what I use. So yeah, you basically get your bank account in one window, and then you get your calculator in the other, and then you have your phone out where your app is that you keep all your budgeting, and split your screen. So in case you don't know, this is Windows, but what I do is you grab your window, and then you hold the Windows key, and then you hit the right arrow, and it will snap it to the right side of the screen. Fun fact. So then I split my screen like this. I have my bank on one, calculator on the other, phone in my left hand, and then I use my little numpad here. And then that's why you get a calculator app that has history. So if something's really off, you can check to make sure your math is good. And then you just work your way down. You got to do it weekly. It is like dishes. The longer that you neglect balancing your budget, the harder it is going to be for you to remember. I'm telling, maybe my memory is terrible. No, 100% my memory is terrible. I can remember that much. Don't get to a point where you leave your budget, because I'm telling you, it's like dishes. If you don't do dishes for 3 weeks, it's going to be so bad that you're not going to want to do it ever. It's just, it's bad. So you're going to start getting Chinese, you're going to start getting pizza, you're going to start ordering stuff and spending more money than you need to just because you don't want to do dishes. First off, your roommates, if you have them, are going to want you to do dishes. And second off, just stay on top of them, and they're not going to get so bad that you don't want to do it. Same thing with your budget. Stay on top of it. And if you don't stay on top of it, be disciplined. Go back and find the time that you didn't do it, and then work from there, because it forces you to be kind of punished, but it takes hardly much more time at all. It's a lot worse in your head. Just like not having a budget at all, it's worse in your head. The way that I get around this and money, so there's a lot of times these apps have notes. So what I do is, at the end of the whole thing, because there is a very likely possibility that you will get to, in your app of choice, you'll get to a point where you're depositing all the money and you're feeling good, and then you'll have, let's say, 180 left, and you throw that 180 in Overflow. Then you're going to get to a point where you look at the total of your app, where it will have the total of what your bank account should be, and you'll look at your bank account and there'll be different numbers. That's a problem. That's not balancing anything. That means something's off. So there's two things you can do. What fiscally responsible people will do is go through the entire thing and find out what they missed. Sometimes I'll do that, and sometimes the amount that's different is the exact amount that you missed. Maybe some transaction somewhere that you didn't catch. Also, what you can do, I judge the severity of the situation. So if I get to the end of it, and let's say, my income is 1,500 a month or something, and I have a difference of like $250, I missed something big. Something big came out of my budget and I missed it. That's bad. You got to find that, because that means someone can have your card. You got to do detective work. And every time you do your budget, there's a risk that this could happen. But most of the time, and 90% of the time, you're going to get to a point where, it's fine. And by it's fine, I mean that you're off 1386. If that happens, okay, I missed it. I went to Taco Bell and I don't see it in my bank record really, and I could spend all day looking in it. But 1386, not a big deal. What I would do in that case, if I went to Overflow and I had a few hundred, or I'm starting to do good, let's say I have 200, and 1386 is the difference between my bank account and my app, meaning that I spent 1386 outside my app that my bank account is showing I spent somewhere, I would just insert it as balance, is what I would call it, and then I would put 1386, and then sometimes there's a note in the app, and then you can just put, what I do is I put the date, and I put whatever current date I'm balancing, so today it'd be 12/21, and that means when I go to do my budget next week, I know that I balanced my budget 100% on 12/21, which means I don't have to go into my bank records prior to 12/21 and find out, what did I spend, what didn't I spend, whatever. So that gets to a point where it lets you not have to go digging way, way, way back and do the work that you don't need to do because you just balance that out. Again, it's up to your discretion how far you want to go, how much detective work you want to do. Me, I don't lose sleep over it. I lose a few here and there, and I'm still gaining more money than I'm spending somehow, even though my wife is still in school, so she's spending obviously more than she's making because she's not making anything. And I'm somehow able to hold this ship together. Don't ask me how. So that means things are good, though. So this budget helps me in that sense, where I could be stressed all day long. Oh my God, I'm supporting 2 people or 3 people. And how do I know I'm going to be okay in 6 months? Well, if you see things going green instead of red, you're good. So that's really balancing. I hope that makes sense. And I kind of talked about falling off the wagon earlier. Don't fall off the wagon on this. When I first started my budget, I think in the first 3 years, I stopped for probably on average a month and a half, 3 times. So 3 different times over 3 years, I stopped for about a month and a half. And I think it was just burnout of like having to watch something I'm not used to. I'm not used to having to track everything, or I would beat myself up over not tracking a purchase or not balancing it or something, and it would make me just go, fine, I'm not doing it anymore. And guess what? Stress comes back. Money stress is always there. It will always come back. Stay on the wagon. And if you're off the wagon, get back on. Just do it. Get back into it, because once you start doing it, it's going to make things a lot easier on you. Trust me. I think that's the main thing. And really, this is supposed to be one video. I got to find some kind of video editing software and figure out how to stitch. I ended up having to do like 4 different takes of things from me messing stuff up. So I'm going to try to stitch this into one giant massive video, or I don't know the best way to do it. But anyway, I'm going to try to get all this together, and then I do have some plans to do some other stuff, specifically on different accounts. I ramble enough that I might have just covered everything in one video. But if you think of something, you have questions, try to send them to me, and maybe I can do a Q&A type thing. If you are thinking or having problems with something else, let me know, and I can try to see if I can come up with better ways to do this. I know this is terrible to watch, and if you muscled through all this, super appreciative. I really appreciate it. I just hope that I helped you in any kind of way. But I toyed around with an idea of making a channel to basically help people with different aspects of modern day life, where basically I could give tips on other things. So if it's not budget, maybe it's how to buy a used car and make it dependable or whatever. I don't know. If you have other things, let me know, and maybe I can help with that. If there's a market for this, I've wanted to help people with budgets, but I didn't really know how to do it or if people really needed it. And if I see a need and I know people will watch it and benefit them, I'll do it. So let me know. And hopefully, this massive rambling was helpful to somebody. All right, thanks.